Sony has just announced that they're not going to attend E3 in 2020. While when they announced this in 2019, it took us all by surprise, when you look at it retrospectively, it makes sense. The games that they had shown from their major first-party studios in 2017 and 2018 are either just releasing or still yet due to release. But with the PlayStation 5 coming this holiday, many of us presumed that they would return to E3 to have a proper conference because that's just how it's been done for generations. We're in a different market nowadays. So what I want to analyze is, does it matter that they're going to not be at E3? How is PlayStation treating their fans by not attending, and what else do they have planned? What is going on with their first-party studios, and what can we expect in the launch window of the PlayStation 5? I take a look at all that and more in this episode of Industry Perspective. In June of 2018, fans tuned in worldwide to E3 to watch their favorite publishers and developers highlight games across multiple platforms. Sony had been a perennial favorite in this regard, with years of memorable reveals and events. In fact, I still talk to people today that talk about the God of War reveal being their favorite moment in E3 history. But in 2018, while Sony's showcase highlighted some very large titles, the show itself was generally poor. The messaging was disjointed, and for the media in attendance, it just became a laughingstock. Now, a few months after that E3, PSX was canceled. This was the fan show that had been running for 4 years prior, but Shawn Layden said, quote, "Sony doesn't have enough to bring people together in North America to have that event." Less than 2 months later, Sony then announced that they would not attend E3 2019, which took everybody by surprise. Reflecting on the decision later, however, it made a lot more sense. At E3 2018, Sony showed 4 core titles: Spider-Man, Death Stranding, The Last of Us 2, and Ghost of Tsushima. Now, if you examine that lineup a little deeper, you realize that the former 2 are not first-party, and Death Stranding only just recently released. The latter 2 major first-party titles will still not release until later this year in 2020. Meanwhile, God of War had just released in April of 2018 and Horizon Zero Dawn a year earlier in early 2017. Now, while those are tremendous experiences, God of War and Horizon Zero Dawn are 2 of my favorite titles of this generation, and I've platinumed them both. Those types of experiences take years to make. And of course, what that means is that the bulk of Sony's major first-party studios won't have anything new for some time yet. Well, you have to realize, of course, that this is by design. Shawn Layden had previously said that he wanted Sony to make fewer, yet bigger titles. For perspective on that, look at Sucker Punch, who's been working on Ghost of Tsushima since the release of infamous Second Son, and that released nearly 6 years ago in March of 2014. Now, given all of that, skipping E3 2019 seemed to at least make sense from a messaging standpoint. Though the bigger concern for me, and tens of millions of PlayStation fans alike, is not necessarily that there wouldn't be a conference, but rather how is PlayStation going to get in front of fans? While it's generally accepted that E3 is not necessarily required for media coverage in today's world, it's watched by millions of people the world over. But more importantly, over the past couple of years, it's also become a very big and growing fan event as well. It was at that time that many expected Sony would bring back PSX for 2019. In fact, if you go now and Google PSX Sony 2019, there are still articles pulling up about how PSX will return and how the PS5 would even be shown there. But alas, 2019 came and went without any major PlayStation event at all. Instead, what happened was a major shakeup among PlayStation's executive leadership. Now, I'm not going to dive into the details right now, but Shawn Layden's departure was certainly questionable, and we never really got the real story of why Jim Ryan is now in charge. Yoshida was moved over to indie development, and Herman Hulst was put in charge of worldwide studios. But regardless, we're now 2 weeks into 2020, and we have confirmation that Sony will not attend E3 again. In their official statement, they said they would instead attend hundreds of consumer shows throughout the year. Now, what this means is anyone's guess, but saying hundreds is confusing as it is. However, I come back to the fan aspect of the show. While attendance figures for E3 are lower than other major shows worldwide, particularly in the Asian region, the competitiveness for market share is much greater in North America than it is in Asia. So while I imagine it's definitely a negative ROI for Sony to attend E3, I don't have actual figures here, but estimates are somewhere in the $30 to $40 million range all up. For a division that generated $17 billion in revenue in their last fiscal year, it seems like a small price to pay to excite fans and spend some on-site time with them as the world celebrates the industry. Though Nintendo hasn't held a proper conference stage show at E3 for a number of years now, they're still a major part of E3 and have a floor presence for fans to experience as part of the overall show, which many appreciate. So then, what does this mean for the PS5? Sony has just announced a month-long PlayStation experience in their New York City location from January 14th through February 16th, but hasn't provided details on what exactly that means beyond a statement that it will be a celebration of 25 years of PlayStation with a collection of PS4 and PSVR titles. PS5 is not mentioned. Thus, all signs are now pointing to a PS5 reveal event in late February, very similar to what we saw with the PS4. We'll likely then see some sort of streamed event in the summer to reveal the price point and allow pre-orders to begin being taken. And that of course sets up an interesting scenario as Sony knows exactly when Xbox's conference will be at E3, thus leaving it up to them as to when the messaging will be most effective, something that Sony has been very good at in the past. Now, given what I mentioned of their major first-party studios, I'm also very curious to see what they are doing to create an exciting launch lineup, particularly as two of their major releases that are releasing on the PlayStation 4 are coming prior to the PS5's launch. The other major first-party studios under Sony's banner are working on longer-term projects, presumably a number of sequels as well, like God of War 2, Spider-Man 2, and Horizon Zero Dawn 2. Now, I know some of you are hoping for Horizon Zero Dawn 2 at launch, and don't get me wrong, I would love to see it as well. Even though they're using the Decima engine, I still think that's a short time frame of development for the level of detail and the size of that game. But hey, we can hope. And this also likely means that we're going to see some third-party relationships to fill the gaps. Titles like Godfall, for instance, which may be why we heard of that game first. But for now, we'll just have to continue to anxiously wait until the official reveal. While the PlayStation team's messaging has been poor over the last 18 months, I'm still confident that the PlayStation 5 is going to be an incredible console that offers amazing experiences. After all, PlayStation Studios have some of the top development talent in the world working there. But what I really want from PlayStation is to get back to focusing on the fans. Whether or not you agree with them declining to attend E3 in 2020, I think we can all agree that there's nothing like getting hands-on at an event with new console hardware and new games. It's a shared experience, and it's simply something that a digital live stream cannot replicate. So while we anxiously await the PlayStation 5, let's also hope that Sony has some bigger things in store for later this year. Until next time.